morning. Welcome everybody here in the room and online to this conference. I would just like to start with some housekeeping rules. The first one is please switch off your phones, at least the sound of them. That would be great. Then, so put them in silent mode. We have Wi-Fi here, so you see the instructions on the screen. In front here we have for people on the podium and for you. We also have a hashtag for the conference, which you may use on social media if you want to communicate about the event. Also, and I would like to remind that the conference will be filmed. It will be broadcasted on the website of the conference, of the ILO and Eurostat. A recording will be made available at a later point in time on the conference site. There will also be a photographer who will take photos of the speakers, of the audience, and also during the break, so please be prepared for that. And the pictures may be posted later on the website. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Mariana Kotzeva, the Director General of Eurostat, who will take us to the first session, or the opening session.
Dear Commissioner, dear Ms. Tomei, distinguished guests, colleagues from different parts of the world, dear friends, it's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of Eurostat and ILO. So we are together in the crime with ILO. So with Rafael, we will host this first session, and we want very warmly to welcome you all. Thank you very much to all the speakers, panelists, participants for making your way to come to Brussels today to discuss a topic which is really exciting because we are living in a fast-changing world marked by digital transformation, new technologies like artificial intelligence, and the life is changing around us. And one of substantial changes in the labor market in the recent years have been the changes in the forms of employment. And as you know, in the statistical world, when the world changes, statistics has to change as well. Because in our mission is to provide high quality comparable statistics across the world, across the countries, which could facilitate and support decision making for public good, for prosperity of the society and businesses. And it's even more exciting when the phenomena are new, and we have to find a way to measure them, and we have to find a way to measure them in comparable way, and we have to do it fast, because the world cannot wait for us for ages that the white smoke comes from statistical discussions, and we say this is the standards. Therefore, in statistics, we work very closely across the countries and across international organizations, and this is how, with Rafael, sitting in an international meeting, we were having a coffee and we are discussing what new around you. And then he mentioned the new forms of employment, and we said, why we don't do something together to bring all this work which have been done in the last years, and we put experts that could discuss, and then we take it from there to push, to set international standards and to implement them in the countries. But when discuss this, we say that it's not enough to close the statisticians because this is in a room, because this is a new phenomena. And we are always starting with the user needs. So therefore, we are very pleased that you managed to put in your agendas representatives not only of the statistical world, but from employers, employee organizations, from academia, from policy making, that you join the discussions in these 2 days. With that, because we share the labor, whole responsibility for this conference and for collaboration, I pass the floor to Rafael. Very warm welcome. I hope you enjoyed the discussions. Please, Rafael.
Thank you very much, Mariana, and thank you. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for your interest in this important meeting that we are hosting along with Eurostat. I would like to join Mariana in welcoming you to Brussels on behalf of the ILO as well, International Labour Organization. Thank you to each of you for coming from different places to discuss the relevant and attractive subject as the measurement of new forms of work. As we know very well, the hectic changes in the world of work makes us statisticians to have to catch up, as Mariana has just told us, and even being forward-looking, showing as flexibility and adaptability as possible. We have a clear responsibility that the data our countries will produce could be crucial to guide accurate policies, which will impact on people's well-being. We need this more than ever. Many uncertainties and fears on how technologies impact the quantity and the quality of work, on how new, previously impossible even to imagine, ways of work relationships are emerging, are in everyone's minds. Workers, employers, governments, and citizens. We have the responsibility to shed light in this moving target despite the technical complexities and the various fronts that we are going to face simultaneously. This conference will aim at that, building on the experience we have all together and trying to extract lessons to refine the way we will have to move forward soon. The ILO is clearly very happy to join efforts with Eurostat in this task, and we are also proud to have brought workers and employers to the discussion. As you may know, our organization is intrinsically tripartite, and this is particularly relevant when discussing the measurement of new forms of work. We are both parts, workers and employers, at the steering wheel of these changes, and obviously privileged actors, and deeply involved in what are the consequences of these changes. In the ILO, we have recently concluded the 21st International Conference of Labour Statisticians, which celebrated the 100th anniversary of setting standards in the labour market. We have faced similar situations to this of drastic changes in the world of work in the last 100 years, and the tripartite discussions have always enriched and helped the process of reaching better harmonized definitions, concepts, and in the end, data for citizens. At the global and policy level, the ILO will be embarking on the process of a standard setting for platform work as from next year, and therefore having clarity on what we are concretely talking about is a prerequisite to any sound negotiation between governments, employers, and workers. Platform work is only one of the new forms of work. In parallel, the last ACLS has agreed that work has to start to set statistical standard on how to measure platform work by 2028 in order to start producing harmonized data on this form of work globally. There are other new forms of work which are emerging as well, and we will need accurate data to be tracking this phenomenon for policy making and analysis. There are other new forms of work, but this is just some of the crucial areas that we will touch on these coming 2 days. And through the wide range of interventions and discussions, I have no doubt we will gain a better understanding of the challenge we face to produce meaningful statistics and forward-looking guidance. I hope you will have the opportunity to actively participate in all the sessions we have prepared and take advantage of all the expertise and wisdom that is in this room, of all of you also in the corridors and in bilateral meetings. Finally, but not least, a very, very huge thank to Eurostat for all the logistics and efforts and all the carefully prepared and planning that we have had these days. Thank you, and I wish you a very fruitful event.
Thank you, Rafael. It was a joint venture, of course, all the preparation with ILO. With Rafael, we will host this introductory session, and we are very pleased and honored that we have 4 distinguished speakers in this first introductory session. To bring these different perspectives, as both of us were saying, to the topic. So it's my honor and pleasure to invite to the podium Commissioner Paolo Gentiloni. Commissioner Gentiloni is Commissioner for Economy, and he is responsible for Eurostat. So you have a big fun of European and now global statistics. So Commissioner, please, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Mariana and Rafael. And it's a pleasure, of course, for me to be here in this conference. Let me start thanking Eurostat and the ILO because the event is on a topical question, the topical question of measuring new forms of employment. And we are doing this in a rather positive environment for employment in general in Europe, because, as you know, despite the shocks of the past few years, the pandemic, the war, the energy crisis, the EU labor market has remained remarkably resilient. We saw it also in your flash estimate a couple of days ago, about June. So the employment is still very high and strong, and the unemployment rate is at a record low. And these records are months after months. And this is, I think, in itself a huge success of the European economy and of our social model. We were able to keep the jobs in place also during the pandemic through a new instrument that we called SURE. And this, I think, is part of the positive picture. However, the evolution of a world of work and of forms of employment require that we look beyond this macro data. Innovation and technology are changing the organization of work, employment conditions, and labor relationships. Today, standard forms of employment are no longer standard. Paid labor now comes in increasing varieties, from traditional employment to dependent or independent self-employment and various forms of casual labor. The emergence of the digital economy has the tendency to accelerate the erosion of traditional employment relationship. And we will see a lot more of this with AI, of course, in the coming years. And it also affects our ability to understand and measure these new forms of employment, which is why we need a foresight approach to remain ahead of the curve. The EU was the first jurisdiction to adopt specific rules for digital labor platforms. What we call the Platform Work Directive will bring 2 key improvements. It will help determine the correct employment status of people working for digital platforms, and it regulates the use of algorithms in the workplace. Your discussion today will provide input towards the future development and data collection of high-quality statistical information, reflecting on changes in the labor market and allowing the monitoring of related economic and employment policies. This is the challenge we want to tackle over the course of this conference by gathering policymakers, statistical experts, and researchers from across Europe and the world. Future-proofing our way of measuring changes in the workplace with relevant and trustworthy data is essential to be able to develop right policy response to new forms of employment. So I'm confident that today's event will offer valuable insight on future developments and standards needed for high-quality statistical data that, in turn, can form the basis for well-informed decisions and shape effective policies for the future. And in conclusion, let me use this opportunity to thank Eurostat, Mariana. As you know, the Commission cycle is changing, so we will have, hopefully in autumn, a new Commission. And let me really commend all the effort that Eurostat made to continuously upgrade and innovate. For example, on the green transition, on sustainable development goals, showing, as I'm sure also ILO is doing, that the evolution of statistical work is absolutely crucial for decision makers. So it was really an interesting working experience. Thank you for that, and I wish you a very successful conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. When I started to be head of statistical office, my predecessor said that when you go to the world of statistics, even for 3 months, then you stay in your heart forever in official statistics, and this is true. So I'm sure that you continue following at least Eurostat social media in your new endeavors, and you send nice messages. This could be better explained, and users should understand this sophisticated number. So thank you very much for all your support over these years. So now we'll proceed with, of course, we are co-organizing with ILO, so it's my pleasure to give the floor to Ms. Manuela Tomei. Ms. Tomei is Assistant Director General for Governance, Rights and Dialogue. I think it's a very inspiring title with a combination of responsibilities that cover many different aspects. Please,
inspiring and challenging, I would add. Thank you very much, Mariana, and good morning, everyone. Commissioner, Tina from the International Organization of Employers, Luc Triangle, the Secretary General of the International Trade Union Confederation, workers, and esteemed colleagues and friends. It is my honor to speak at this global conference on measuring new forms of employment, which is jointly convened by Eurostat and the ILO, which have been partners in crime, not only on this occasion, but for a long while, and I hope that we will continue to commit crimes together in the future. It's for a good cause. It is really a privilege, as also the Commissioner has highlighted, to witness this unique gathering of policymakers, statistical experts, representatives from employers and workers' organizations, researchers from around the world to address one of the most pressing challenges, which is indeed understanding and measuring the new forms of employment. I think that the value addition of this particular conference lies precisely in the richness and diversity of perspectives, each and all of which are absolutely essential in order to advance this agenda. The world of work is changing in ways and at a pace which are truly unprecedented. Digital, environmental, and demographic shifts are driving rapid and unpredictable change in the nature of work, in how work is organized, while working relationships keep evolving. The Commissioner referred to also the rapid erosion of the traditional employment relationship. Polycrisis, wars and geopolitical tensions are adding a layer of complexity that make the promotion of decent work for all, which is at the core of the mandate of the ILO, even more challenging than before. So against such a backdrop, the availability of comprehensive, meaningful, and reliable statistics is of utmost importance. They permit to better seize the changing work realities and monitor developments over time, facilitating better informed policy action. So the formulation of statistical standards, the production of data needs indeed to be meaningful for those who will make use of those data, for policymakers. And good quality data are essential to improving the working conditions and well-being of workers, and therefore enhancing the exercise of labor rights ultimately. What is not measured, we know very well, is not acted upon. But we need to be sure that what we measure helps advance our understanding of the new phenomena that are emerging and the new trends. And equally important is to know how to use the data collected, or in other words, how to make data sing. Because policymakers don't have much time at disposal. They cannot go into, elaborated notes. They need actually to get the figure that tells the story and that they can use for policy making purposes. So I would just to highlight the fact that over the past years, there has been significant progress. And I would just like to highlight a number of them and see also how those progress on the statistical front have helped also improve policymaking. I would like to acknowledge first the tremendous advancement which was brought about by the new statistical standards adopted since 2013. In particular, the one concerning statistics of work, employment, and labor underutilization, which reckons that unpaid care work is also work. I mean, that was revolutionary. This resolution expanded the boundaries of the world of work and made visible work historically performed by women without pay it's work that enables labor markets and societies to function. From a policy viewpoint, the statistical standard meant acknowledging that the amount of time that women, because it's mainly women, shoulder a disproportionate amount of unpaid care work, so the amount that women spend in unpaid care work has implications for their availability to engage in paid employment and in which type of work. After all, there are only 24 hours in a day. So that standard has given further impetus and legitimacy, and we can see it from the importance that this issue has gained in international and national policy agendas, to policies facilitating a more even distribution of unpaid care, not only within families, but also between families and the state, through, for instance, greater investments in public policies for childcare and elderly care, which is very relevant in the current demographic transition and in the rapid aging of populations, not only in this part of the world, also in many emerging economies. It also made us ask ourselves if new forms of work organization like teleworking, which may facilitate, among others, work-family reconciliation, results into more or less gender equality at work and at home, and further explore its implications for hours of work, mental health, and work-related violence and harassment. This June, the International Labour Conference adopted a set of conclusions on the care and support economy that affirm that decent work requires the adoption of effective implementation of well-designed care leave policies and services, which enable workers with family responsibilities to enter, remain, and progress in labor markets without discrimination. And to this end, governments are urged, and this brings me to this conference, to collect and disseminate data on unpaid and paid care work in line with existing international statistical standards and with international statistical standards that will be developed to provide an evidence base for policy making. Let me now turn to another new statistical standard on the informal economy, which has been recently adopted. The standard expands the scope of the previous statistical definition by providing statistical definitions of both informal economy and informal work, including informal unpaid work. And here you can see also the connection with the previous statistical standard. And the new resolution on informality also strengthened the operational definitions of informal employment and informal sector. And this is not minor. This is not a minor detail for policy purposes. For example, the operational criteria recommended for identifying employees in formal employment refer to employer contributions to Social Security and employees' effective access to paid sick leave and annual leave, thereby suggesting that the formalization of informal economy and informal work entails the extension of legal coverage to workers excluded or insufficiently covered, and the effective respect of laws and regulations through declared employment relationships and contractual agreements providing adequate protections. So you can see how important it is. I mean, the sophistication over time of international statistical standards. There is a growing, I believe, interest in providing very practical tips and guidance about how to use those standards. And I would say that all of this is the result of the close alignment of the new statistical standard on informality with ILO's recommendation 204 on the transition from the informal to the formal economy, which provides guidance on policy action in this domain. Both standards use the same definition of informality and cover informality of jobs, of work activities, and of economic units, as well as the contribution of informal activities to GDP. So this alignment between statistical standards and labor standards is extremely useful from a policy and operational viewpoint. The amount of and depth of data is also unprecedented. And here I'm going to make some publicity to the ILO standard work. The ILO Stat database had over 280 million data points in 2023, which is a 5-fold increase in just 5 years. Importantly, this is not just about more data, it's about better data as well. And this certainly is a motive of pride and satisfaction. However, much more work is needed. And this brings me to what are the gaps in terms of data for policymakers. We definitely continue to have major data gaps, as current data is insufficient to accurately track the changing world of work. This has been said by all those who have preceded me. And there is another challenge that we are confronted with, which is that existing data is not always systematically embedded in policymaking, sometimes due to a lack of clarity of what we are measuring and why we are measuring certain things. So I think that this is also part of the collective challenge. So I believe that this conference is a very timely opportunity to help set up a common path for the coming years towards the development of better concepts on key topics, but also to ensure that measurement takes place and good quality data is generated and used. Looking at the agenda for the next 2 years, I note themes that have gained traction in the ILO's policy debate more recently. This is the case, for instance, of digital platform work. Next year, as Rafael alluded to in his introductory remarks, tripartite negotiations will take place at the International Labour Conference with the aim of agreeing on a new international labour standard on decent work in the platform economy. Interestingly, this labour standard setting process which will conclude in June 2026, and we hope with a robust standard, will run in parallel to a statistical standard setting process, which will begin in late 2024 and conclude in 2028. As you see, again, there is a sort of alignment of statistical standard setting and labor standard setting. The labor standard setting discussion offers a unique opportunity for our global tripartite constituents to delve into the impact on new technologies, on business models, on the nature of work and its organizations, on work relationships, and also on the exercise of fundamental principles and rights at work. The conference will address issues such as remuneration, deactivating policies, algorithmic effects on working conditions, but also the skills which are required to harness employment opportunities in the platform economy, new occupations that are emerging and that offer new opportunities of employment and income. Other related and topical features featuring on this conference agenda is the impact of artificial intelligence and algorithmic management, issues which are at the center of any ongoing debates and for which no authoritative data is available for the time being. Algorithmic management is becoming increasingly integrated into not only digital labor platforms, but also traditional workplaces, and increasingly more so. So this is really something that we need to pay very close attention to. And while certainly it increases organizational ability to control and monitor complex economic and work processes, it also raises challenges such as potential bias, lack of transparency, and the risk of exacerbating existing inequalities if not properly governed. To fully harness their potential benefits, we must understand their implications for workers, and high-quality data is vital, again, for the quality of these debates. So my hope, and I'm concluding, is that at the end of this conference, we'll have a better sense of which path to take, not only to improve the availability of data on ongoing transformations in labor markets, but also to better link data with policymaking for better informed decisions that promote fair, inclusive, sustainable employment practices and decent work for all. Thank you very much.
It's okay like this? Yeah. Thank you. And now I am privileged to also bring particularly employers and workers to this dialogue. And I'm happy to and very glad to introduce Tina Morney, the Director of Policy of the International Organization of Employers. The floor is yours, Tina. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafael, and thank you to Eurostat for inviting us to this event. It is a pleasure and honor for the IOE to be here with all of you at this gathering. I see some familiar faces from the ILO and also colleagues who attended the ICLS last year, and also I'm really keen to also meet new colleagues. I'm also joined here by my colleague Pablo Dragun from Argentina, who flew in. He's one of our members. He will intervene at tomorrow's session. For those who are not aware of the IOE, we are the secretariat of the employers group at the ILO, which, as you understand, is tripartite. We have governments, employers, and workers there. We represent more than 50 million companies in more than 140 countries. Our members, the employer and business organizations, are on the front line when it comes to shaping labor law, when it comes to shaping policies on labor and social issues at the national levels. We are the voice of business not just at the ILO, but also at the G20, G7, OECD, and the UN. And we don't just represent large companies, but we also represent micro and small medium enterprises in both developed and developing economies. We are 104 years old this year. So the ICLS last year was a milestone. We celebrated and marked a century of commitment to labor statistical standards. It was hosted at the ILO. So thank you so much, Rafael, Ritash, colleagues. It was a very successful gathering. This was a crucial platform for global statistical experts to address challenges in the workplace, to workforce, and to advance social justice through enhanced, relevant, and up-to-date statistical definitions and methodologies. It's obvious that accurate statistical data is needed to make better informed decisions, as Manuel mentioned, policy development, policy reform, and policy implementation. We are the data users, and we're always curious to learn about what the data is telling us about the labor trends. For the employers group data, and this is something that Eurostat might be interested in to hear and consider on future work plan, data which are essential to contributing to well-functioning labor market would include things that we see lacking in many organizations, or different organizations are telling different stories when it comes to that. So I will highlight, I would say, 5 points. So the first point is on micro and small medium enterprises. How are they doing in the economy? Even in Europe, more than 80%, and even in Switzerland where we are based, 90% of companies are made of micro, small, medium enterprises. They create jobs. In the developing economies at one point, we did see some data that 9 out of 10 workers work in the private sector. How are they faring when it comes to labor policy interventions at the national level when they are introduced? The second point is on productivity. Some data we saw are conflicting. There's some discrepancies between different, Bretton Woods organizations, and perhaps it's the way we search for the data that is probably an issue, because we are not statisticians, we are policymakers. We do like to see more data on productivity because that's linked to jobs and economy. The third point is something which Manuela highlighted, which was on informality. Is the data giving us enough information on which policy interventions are working and which ones aren't? This is important for not just the LDCs, but also many emerging economies. We welcome the ICLS resolution last year on the measurement on informality. This is something that we find very practical and something that could be used to help us navigate. The fourth point is on skills. We talk about AI, we talk about generative AI, we talk about just transition, and last year was the year of skills at the EU. How can we leverage the power of data to help policymakers realize the full potential of lifelong learning, upskilling, and reskilling? Gender equality is something that we also need to look more into. I will shamelessly pitch that we are on the board of the Equal Pay International Coalition together with I2C. We would really urge, your governments to join, companies to join, trade unions to join the Equal Pay International Coalition, because this is an organization of like-minded organizations, stakeholders that want to promote equal pay for equal work of equal value. So we need data there as well to help us. And finally, enabling environment for business, which data can help us promote sustainable enterprises. And this brings me to the point of promoting statistical endeavors with tripartite agreement on definitions and the key issues that will emerge from the next International Labour Conference. The constituents will embark on the standard setting next year. And the 21st ICLS has mandated the ILO to form a tripartite meeting of experts to start the work towards establishing a statistical standard on digital platform work by 2028, when the 22nd ICLS will be held. So this is something our group pushed for. The statistical tripartite meeting of experts should be held after the conclusion of the standard setting process. This will be completed in 2026. It's a double discussion. And once constituents reach a consensus on the policy aspects, there'll be more clarity on data collection. Of course, we are in 2024. We cannot wait until the policy discussions are over. We understand governments are already receiving requests on data collection on this part. So here on this topic, we would like to highlight 4 more points. So the first point is on balance. We foresee this to be a very difficult debate, as you know, but an important debate, and a balanced outcome where all constituents feel ownership of the instrument will ensure buy-in and support and effective implementation. The second point is, and we talked about classification of working relationships. We need to also recognize and be honest with ourselves and also realize that there are also the existence of genuine self-employed or independent contractors. We are aware of the EU directive on the platform work, which was adopted recently at EU Parliament. But here for the international labor standard, it needs to take into account other realities in other developing countries and national circumstances. The third point I would like to make is we would like to invite colleagues to also discover and learn from other countries, their experiences on the classification part, and to have an open mind on what can work and what might not work. Our suggestion would be to see if the current interventions or legal decisions on employment relationships are negatively or positively impacting employment, economic growth, and other opportunities. We need to leverage innovation and technology to promote decent work. And the fourth point is, please reach out to us if you have any questions or doubt. We are at your disposal. So to this end, it is obviously important to involve both employer organizations and workers' employment organizations when we actively discuss a future development of statistics on new forms of employment, on data sources, harmonization of data, definitions, and measurements. I end my remarks by sincerely thanking Eurostat and ILO for having us. Thank you, Mariana, Rafael. We look forward to have a successful outcome of this event and also from the international debate on the platform economy starting next year, where it can both benefit platform workers and the platform alike. We count on you, Eurostat colleagues, statistical experts here to help us navigate through this changing world of work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dina, for this, for your speech. And I now give the floor to Mr. Luc Triangle. He's the General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Rafael. Thank you, Mariana. Thank you also, Manuela and Tina, for your insights and your views. So I will speak on behalf of the International Trade Union Confederation. We are the World Organization for Trade Unions, organizing 340 national confederations in 169 countries, altogether more than 200 million workers that are affiliated to our trade unions. So in recent years, there has been a growing demand from policymakers, companies, and workers for a better and a deeper understanding of new labor market practices. And these, initially observed in isolated cases, proliferated, allowing some of them to bypass standard labor regulations. And the euphemistic name of non-standard employment or new forms of work hide many of the problems generated. Precarious and non-wage relations, low remunerations, irregular hours of work, no formal contracts. Consequently, it is essential to measure its prevalence with the highest statistical standards to fully understand their depth and the scope. Workers are increasingly managed by computer-programmed procedures that coordinate tasks. These are called, as you all know, algorithmic management, and reduce human intervention, limiting opportunities for negotiation, opportunities for appeal and reconsideration, and potentially then also impacting workers negatively. New forms of work and digital platform work often involves unpredictable schedules, challenging working hours, and lower earnings, altering the life-work balance. Workers face unstable income structures and unclear platform mechanisms, forcing them to accept lower incomes and precarious working conditions. The effect of these practices have deep actual and future impact on workers. Many companies, many firms operating on new forms of work and digital platforms use service agreements instead of formal employment contracts, resulting in a lack of social protections and benefits for workers. And these leave workers vulnerable in cases of sickness, injury, parenthood, unemployment, and especially also at old age. Younger workers who face higher unemployment levels throughout the world are particularly affected, as they may accept these conditions without considering long-term impacts. Workers also face challenges related to data privacy and the absence of effective grievance mechanisms. The complexity of the digital platform ecosystem can obscure accountability, making it difficult for workers to address grievances or protect their privacy. The regulatory framework is still underdeveloped, leaving workers in precarious situations. The bright side is that now various countries are exploring strategies to extend protections, such as reclassifying workers as employees or introducing new legal instruments. And also the ILO is working in the development of a tripartite agreed instrument to frame the platform economy, but the work ahead will be hard and is hard. And I'll come back to that at the very end. A special point is in relation to those that are considered informal workers. ITUC highlighted the need for special consideration in the labor statistics of those non-declared or non-registered workers, employees who are not declared to any social security. The digital economy and the new forms of work offer the potential to increase these categories of unprotected workers. Over 1/3 of workers in the so-called informal economy are employees whose employers do not fulfill legal registration requirements. While the informal economy is a complex taxonomy of workers, statistical authorities must clearly identify these non-registered workers who should be the primary subjects of labor inspection. So in a nutshell, when we talk about new forms of employment, we see 5 main issues. First of all, the algorithmic management. Secondly, the work stability and the working conditions. Thirdly, the social protection and employment benefits. Fourthly, data privacy and grievance mechanisms. And fifth point, bridge the legal and regulatory gaps. And the ITUC welcomes all the coordinated efforts to enhance the understanding of these issues. Such efforts will help addressing existing gaps, creating policies that ensure the formal recognition and enforcement of workers' rights. And besides the need of statistical evidence, there is also the political work that needs to continue to formalize informal work. The recently adopted EU directive is a step forward. The key provisions for us are the presumption of employment and the recognition of trade unions. Trade unions successfully secured that presumption of employment will become reality everywhere across Europe. Instead of individual workers navigating lengthy court processes to prove their status, the burden of proof now rests with platform corporations to demonstrate that workers are not employees. The directive also explicitly recognized that the important role of trade unions across all facets of the platform economy, including critical issues such as algorithm management. And the role of collective bargaining in the platform sector is and will be vital and is also part of this process. Regarding the ILO, as already mentioned by previous speakers, there is a process going on, and it's important, this process. And we need indeed an ILO result, because we need to have a level playing field at global level. The EU directive gives us some guidance, but the world needs also a level playing field. And it's clear for us that these standards that will be created hopefully will lead to a convention and indeed clarifies a lot of open issues with regarding to workers' rights and employment rights and social conditions related to these new forms of work and especially to digital platform work. So with this, I would like to conclude wishing you all good work today and tomorrow. because this work that you do here today and tomorrow is absolutely important for getting a better view and understanding of what's going on in the new forms of employment and the new forms of work. Thank you very much.
We are competing who will announce coffee break. Nice. Thank you very much to our distinguished speakers. So now we could close this first session. So the coffee is waiting for you, and then we will resume at 11:15. Yes, this is correct. So it's quite a long coffee break. So just enjoy it. And this is one of the most important things, that people speak to each other, which is purpose also of this conference. Thank you very much.